You're listening to That Music Podcast with Bryson Tarvin, the curriculum designer and educational consultant behind That Music Teacher and the Elementary Music Summit. Each week, Bryson and his guests will dive into the reality of being an elementary music teacher and how music can truly be transformative in the lives of the students you serve. Show notes and resources mentioned in this episode can be found at thatmusicteacher.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to That Music Podcast. Today, I am super excited to welcome Becca Davis back to the podcast. Becca was here way back in episode 97, where she talked about engaging upper elementary students. But today, Becca and I are going to be talking about centers and how to do that in a way that is a little bit simpler than you might think. Becca, thank you so much for joining us back here on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Gosh, that made me seem like that was a really long time ago. It has been. I know
it like that. Every time I just did another thing where it was like, I think it was episode 52 was the last time we talked. I'm like, whoa, that feels like a long time ago. For those of the listeners that didn't check out that original podcast, which by the way, we are going to link it in the show notes. Can you introduce yourself a little bit and share a little bit about your background in music education?
Of course. So I am from Savannah, Georgia. I live down here and I went to college here at what used to be called Armstrong Atlantic State University. It's now part of Georgia Southern. I did my student teaching here, got a job here, and I've been teaching elementary music ever since. This is year number 8 for me. I'm currently at my second school. So I was at one school for 6 years, and then now I'm at a different one for the last 2. And it's been really great. I have learned so much in the last few years. And as soon as I started, I kind of realized there was just such a lack of information for other music teachers, especially considering I know you've talked a lot about the lack of preparation through teacher programs in colleges, which is totally not their fault, but it is a reality of coming to teach elementary music and not knowing anything about what to actually do. So that has kind of been my mission for the last few years, to just try to share anything I can that works for me in my classroom so that hopefully other music teachers can find some inspiration and some help and just, be able to actually run their classrooms and enjoy teaching without completely losing their minds.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest, that the conversation of preparing elementary music educators when we have to shove everything into 4 years, that's a whole other conversation that needs to happen. But I'm really excited to have you today because you've talked about centers before. You previously presented at the Elementary Music Summit about centers before, and a lot of people loved it. People were really into your session and into the information you're able to share. So before we kind of dive into like how to do centers and why why you think that they can be really useful, can you can you share a little bit about what started your interest in centers and how did you start using them in your teaching?
So I have always been really interested in kind of like the activities that are in centers. So the different things that you could do that now I use in centers, but at the time I didn't know that's really what it was. And so as I began to look through different games and activities we could do in class to really make sure that the kids got to show what they know, I found that they just kind of worked out well in centers. And I would say I didn't really fall in love with them until I had done them a couple of times, because at the beginning it was kind of very chaotic and kind of difficult, but just really wanting to do all those different things is what led me to go the centers route. And then after doing them a couple of times, I really was able to fall in love with them and use them on a regular basis. And it's been pretty life-changing, I would say, which sounds dramatic, but I'm not kidding.
All right, well, let's kind of take it a few steps back and do what is that, the saying, explain like I'm 5. For those listeners who might be new to the idea or think they know what's going on, but they're not quite, just so we can all have kind of this definition, can you define what you think of as centers in the context of an elementary music classroom?
Yes, so I kind of think of 2 separate but related things, so centers and small groups. So if you have any type of activity that you are doing and the kids are in small groups, as it sounds, that is considered a small group activity. So if they are in groups of 4 doing a composition activity, doing a, writing rhythm activity, doing a go fish game, any of that kind of stuff counts as small group. So that is one thing that I use, and I use the same activities in small group as in centers. What centers is technically groups of students doing different things. So you could have, 3 different groups, 4 or 5, however many you want, and you have an activity at one, an activity at another, an activity at another. They have a timer, and after a few minutes, they switch to the next group. So that's what centers is. You can use the same activity in centers and also in small group, but that's kind of how I define those two different terms.
I think that's a really good distinction to make, because I have done a lot of small groups in my classroom. Quite frankly, I haven't done anywhere near as much centers, probably for some of the reasons we're going to talk about today of, how to simplify it. But I think you would agree that there's kind of been this resurgence of centers, especially in the elementary music world. I mean, when I think of centers, I really think about you and Aileen Miracle, who have been really kind of sharing a lot of the ways that you can do this. So I'm interested to kind of pick your brain a little bit. Why do you think that centers have become so popular for music teachers?
The short answer is because they work really, really well. When I first started centers, I told you it took a few times for me to really fall in love with them. But the more I did them, the more I found that the students really lit up. There's a lot of different good, amazing things that happen during centers. Number one, the students get lots of different ways to show the things that they know. So if we're working on quarter rest, they can practice quarter rest in lots of different ways throughout one class period, which really helps because we know that not all students think the same. And so one student might have a better time understanding with one activity, another might have a better time understanding with something different. It also allows you to kind of mesh with your kids a little bit more and really have a closer eye on them. So I typically station myself at one center and I get to actually talk to the kids. And when you have 4 or 5 or 6 in front of you, it's a lot easier to notice what they're excelling at or not excelling at rather than having everyone in charge. It also just really helps break up the course of your lessons. Most of our lessons typically end up being very teacher driven, whole group, stuff like that. And so having a day where things are different is just really nice, almost like a break for you and also for the kids. It's just a really nice way to kind of change up things. And then if you, especially after you've done this a few times, kind of station yourself at one center, honestly, it helps you to feel less tired because then at least for one class period, you're not standing up in front of everyone and talking. So the more you do centers, the more you find that they work. And then you, like me, want to share them with everybody else so that they include them as well.
I want to kind of touch a couple of points that you brought up there, because you mentioned basically the benefit of being able to work with just a few students at a time. And while I didn't do a lot of centers, I did do a decent amount of centers when it came to the recorder. It started with the fact of I didn't want to have 28 kids playing the recorder at the same time, as much as I love the recorder. So it was nice to be able to give a little bit more one-on-one or small group feedback. So that is definitely something that I have noticed that is incredible. And as you're talking about, the short answer is it works. I've been doing a lot of work presenting about universal design for learning, and it really kind of comes down to 3 areas of focus, which is multiple means of representation, expression, and engagement. And I think all of those just fit with centers. Multiple ways the kids are able to manipulate the concepts, multiple ways for them to show the concept, and multiple ways for you as the teacher to show them how this concept can work. So, if you're looking for, if any listener is listening and thinking, wow, this could be a really good differentiation opportunity, you're right. And I think that is another great benefit of using centers.
Yes, I totally agree. Quick little story that kind of goes off of that. I, at the end of class, a lot of times, especially if I have, those awkward 2 or 3 extra minutes at the end, I'll ask the kids, okay, what did you learn today? And I'll just call on however many kids I have. And one day we did centers in 3rd grade, and one of the students that doesn't always engage in music class, shot his hand up. He was so excited. And I said, what did you learn today? And he said, I learned that music could be fun. Which was a little bit of, I was like, oh, okay, but does that mean that, all my other classes are not fun? But regardless, whether he thought that or not, he had a really good time. And so it was a student that maybe normally isn't as checked in, and he got that opportunity to check in because there were fun things to do and there were different things to do, and it was a really quick pace. So I was trying not to be offended by that, but it is kind of funny.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things where you're like, thank you, I think. But I totally see how that could be the case. Now, you've talked a little bit about some of the benefits. We talked about, the differentiation side of it, with getting students to try something new or see music in a different way. But I kind of want to turn it a little bit and talk about some of the benefits that you've briefly touched on that teachers might have for doing centers. So can you talk a little bit about how, obviously we're going to go into some of the common challenges and how to address them next. But what are some of the things that you've seen as a teacher that centers have really opened up or changed for you?
Yes, as a teacher, I almost love it more than the kids. So I already mentioned it's really great to be able to work with smaller groups. I typically have I am at the blue station or the green station or whatever, and I station myself there and I get to really interact with the students. It's so much easier to talk to them and notice things about them when you have that smaller group rather than when your focus is on everybody all the time. So that's really nice. Lesson planning wise, it actually makes your life a lot more simple. I typically do kind of a rotation of, okay, I'll do, so many lessons and then I'll do centers. And so when that means that one day of the month or however often you want to do it is pretty much taken care of. I don't have to sit there and spend hours and hours and hours trying to figure out what we're going to do. I'm like, okay, we're going to do centers. And especially after you've done them a couple of times and you have a plan, then okay, I'm going to do this many centers. And then you just kind of plug and play. And especially again, once you've done it a few times, you have some things under your belt. And so it actually makes lesson planning a lot easier. It's also a little bit less exhausting. Sometimes I, get to the end of the day and I realize oh my gosh, I have been folk dancing all day with 6 classes straight. I am exhausted. And so the physical toll of teaching is something we don't talk about a lot, but it's real. And so being able to have, even if only fourth grade is doing centers this week, that's one class period where I maybe get to sit down and, I don't have to be quite as on, when I'm teaching whole group, all that kind of stuff. I almost feel the same as when I'm performing on stage. It's very much like a performance, which kind of sounds bad, but I mean, y'all understand. So it's, it takes a lot of energy and effort, and it's a very different kind of energy and effort when it's centers. It's a little bit more laid back. And so it's really nice to have something that's a little bit different for you, allows you to maybe sit down a little bit and makes lesson planning a little bit easier. And the kids love it too.
Yeah, I think you bring up another really good point, which is, as music teachers, especially at the elementary level, we're actively teaching a lot of the day. And not saying that any other teaching profession is easier or, harder or anything else than that, but just thinking about, especially if we're doing folk dancing unit, we're going to be doing a lot of folk dancing. We're likely going to be, up engaged in the teaching rather than, we don't have a lot of independent work. So that is a really good opportunity for us to have a little bit of all right, we're gonna chill out a little bit, but while also giving our students a different opportunity to interact with those musical skills. So I think we've done a decent good job talking about why centers are important, why they can be helpful. So let's get to what teachers are probably really worried about, which is how do we actually make it happen? Because let's be honest, there are so many things we want to do, and I'm guessing a lot of people do centers on that list. So the biggest question that I hear a lot of, and I'm guessing you hear this a lot as well, is when we're doing centers, how do we keep students on task? What do you have any strategies or systems or anything like that you can share with us to help students stay focused and engaged during center activities?
Yes. So this is kind of a loaded question, but kind of the boiled down version. Number one is I never actually give them enough time to do whatever the activity is. So we're not, they're not sitting at one station for 15 minutes or even 10 minutes. Usually 6 to 8 is kind of the sweet spot for my kids, which might be different than the sweet spot for your kids. And even if that means that they don't get to finish something, I am okay with that because it's not necessarily you have to get it to completion. It's more just, I want you to be thinking different ways and embracing music in different ways. So never give them enough time. Always set a timer because you will not remember when to tell them to get up. I just have a slide on my board just on Google Slides, and I type out the name of each center. If you have numbers at your centers. You could do like 1 is this station, 2 is this station. Just something really simple to help remind them what they're doing at those stations. And then the timer on the board, so that way when that timer goes off, we know it's time to clean up. That is also going to help them stay on task because they're looking at the timer, they can see it. Usually there's music so they can hear the timer, and so they know, oh no, I only have 2 more minutes, I need to hurry up and get on this. Number 3 would be if I have a class that is struggling with that, or especially on the first day that we do centers. On the first day, I am not sitting at one station. On the first day, I am up, I am walking around, I am keeping people on task, I am watching, I am listening, I am writing things down so they think I'm taking grades. I am like really actively monitoring so that they now expect that I'm going to be monitoring all throughout. You can also have different activities that do need to be turned in. I like to have something that does need to be turned in because that proves that they had to do some kind of work. I feel like I had one more that I was going to say. Oh, and the last one is just being super, super, super clear with your expectations before you start. This is where a lot of problems come in with elementary music and teaching in general is you are not super, super, super overly clear with what you expect. You are not going to get what you want. So before we do centers with every grade level, even the 5th graders, we stop and we talk about how we're going to be on task the whole time. I'm like, I'm looking for this, I'm looking for this, I'm looking for this, and just really making it clear that I expect to see them actually working.
Yeah, so like you said, that was a kind of a loaded question, and you bring up so many good points. I mean, I've talked before on the podcast about how I believe, like, for elementary kids, 7 minutes is like the sweet spot. Like anything after 7 minutes is when the squirrels start coming out. So I love that you've seen that as well in your own teaching. You mentioned about expectations, and I'd like to kind of dig a little deeper on that. How do you like specifically set expectations or create a structure that students know exactly what they're supposed to be doing at each center, especially when it might be like a new center in the mix?
Yeah. So before we have any of our centers, I always will start out. I'll say, okay, today we're having a centers day. They usually know what that means after we've done it a few times. And then I'll say, okay, we're going to do these different activities. I give a brief explanation of each one. And then I usually have some sort of directions at that center too, because they're going to forget by the time they get there. But just a little bit of an explanation so they know. And if there's something that's new, that's the one I kind of focus on. And then I go into 4 things I tell them. Remember, well, first of all, we go over our rules. We go over rules pretty much every day. And I have the kids clap and say them back to me. So my rules are follow directions, be respectful, be responsible, be a participant. So we'll go and they kind of echo those after me and clap them. And then I say, in centers, we have our super special centers rules. And so they, again, repeat after me because I want them to be saying it. And so they are number 1 is work the whole time. Number 2 is be respectful to your group. Number 3, do not leave your group. And yes, we do these hand signs. And number 4 is, oh, now I can't remember. Oh, voices on level 2. So that way we're all clear about the expectations. And again, the first time we do this, I am walking around, I am emphasizing those. And then we have a point system in my classroom. So like whole group, they earn points. So after the first center, when we stand up to rotate, I'll stop and be like, okay, did we do number 1? Did we do number 2? Did we do number 3? Did we do number 4? Yes, great, we get a point. And if not, then I get a point. And so it's just that like real time explanation of what's going on.
See, one thing that you've mentioned a couple of times that I want to really bring to attention to all the listeners is we've talked a lot about how when you do centers, it gives us the opportunity to be with a small group, but we should not be doing that the first time or even the first couple times because you're exactly right. That is going to be, especially when a lot of kids, they do centers in their classroom, so they understand the concept, but like moving into the music classroom, and we might do it slightly different or, whatever, like you're going to be needed there to help kind of facilitate putting out the fires and moving people and like, hey, which direction are we going? And the first couple times around. So I think that's a really big takeaway from this conversation is as much as it's great to be able to work with a small group, we really shouldn't do that the first time because you're going to need to be a little bit more of the facilitator and just kind of the keeping everyone on the right track.
Yes, that is totally right. I was at a training the other day and they kept referring to be seen looking. So like being really obvious about looking around the room and stuff like that. And so that's something I really have been taking into my classroom, like making sure the kids know that I'm looking at them and I'm paying attention, especially those first few times. And really, first impressions matter. So whatever you do that first time, they will now see as the normal. So if the first time it's just like, we're doing whatever we want, they're going to think that's normal. But if the first time it's like, we're on task, then they'll take that through the rest of the year.
All right, so we now know how, hopefully, to keep kids engaged, to keep them on track. We set the expectations. Now let's move into what personally was my biggest pain point with centers, which is prep work, cutting things out, storing things. That's another thing that I hear a lot about. And again, this was kind of my biggest thorn with centers. How do you manage personally, and how would you recommend teachers manage any prep that's needed for centers in a way that doesn't just become incredibly overwhelming?
This is so hard. When it comes to centers, you've got lots of different things going on. They usually have a lot of stuff. And I don't know about you, but I get so excited about like fun new activities. Like that's the whole reason I have a Teachers Pay Teacher store, is because I'm always making new stuff for my kids. Cause I'm like, oh, we could do this. Oh, but we could make it pumpkin themed, and like I am just at level 1,000 with those kind of things. So it's been really hard to rein myself in and make it more simple, but I have found some strategies. The first is my rule of having a certain amount of centers. So I usually do 3 centers. I might bump it to 4 this year. We'll see. But I typically only do 3. And out of those 3, my rule is I am only allowed to have 1 new thing at a time. So I cannot make more than 1 new center at a time, which then means that I have to rely on things that I've already done or that can be done without me having to make things. There is a lot of stuff you can do with flashcards, whiteboards, and like rhythm manipulatives, just like the one, a little card that has a quarter note on it and a little card that has eighth notes on it. You can get so much done with just those things. You can have the students do compositions. They can play rhythms. They can figure out rhythms that go to songs you've learned. Like there's so many things they could do with just those couple of things. And so I try to make sure that I'm not going overboard whenever I'm planning my centers, and my rule is only 1. The first time I ever did centers, I had like 7 or 8 at the same time, and everyone was different, and it was too much. It was too much for me to get prepped, and then it was also too much, like the kids couldn't remember everything, and so making it simpler was better. I also typically have kind of like a plug and play situation. So when I do 3 centers, I usually have one that's a worksheet that has to be turned in. So I have that proof you did work. One is typically a game. And then one is whatever my like teacher group is. So whatever is more like the focus, which a lot of times it's more like putting notes on the staff and writing rhythms, or we're doing recorder. Like that's where we're doing the bulk of that. And so having kind of a strategy, if you want 4 or 5, that's fine, but just have a plan for like, okay, I'm going to have a game. I'm going to have a worksheet. I'm going to have, whatever. And so that way you're really just minimizing the amount of decisions you have to make. And then you're also minimizing the amount of stuff that you have to make. And that rule of only 1 makes the biggest difference for people like me who just want to do all the things all the time.
For sure. Whenever we can give ourselves some guide rails, not only is that helpful because it makes sure we can't do all the things, it also makes it so, just like you said, we have one less decision to make. So, all right, we've decided on what to do. How do we store everything so that we, one, know where it is? And this is where I always ran into issues. Remember that they exist so you don't have to recreate the same thing the next time. Because I'm so bad at recreating something and then realizing I already had it. So I'd love to kind of pick your brain on that.
I have also done that. So it's not just you. I like wish I had all my stuff at school, but I'm not at school. So I can't show you everything, but I can kind of describe it. So I have a couple of these big, like the scrapbooking boxes, the like 12 by 12s. And I have them in some like, they're almost like drawers. And so the scrapbook box is the drawer they can pull out. I got them off Amazon years ago. They were not cheap, but I love them. So a cheaper version would just be like, boxes or even scrapbook boxes, but like on shelves. So I have those and I categorize them by concept. So I have like in this box, it is, rhythm activities with quarter notes, eighth notes, and maybe up to quarter rest. Or maybe I also have half notes. And then I have another box that has treble clef activities and another box that has like so on and so forth. And I try to keep up with labeling them. I'm not the best at that, but the more you can label them, the more you'll remember what is there. And then in those, I have multiple activities inside of those boxes. And so it's like big box and then smaller boxes. So I have some little like zippered pouches I also got off of Amazon that I like because they're nice and sturdy. So I have like little ones and then I have like full sheet size ones. But what I used to do before I purchased those was just use Ziploc bags. So any of like card games or something kind of that size goes in just like a sandwich size Ziploc bag. And then you can usually fit a full piece of paper inside of a gallon size Ziploc bag. And so you can pull out one of my boxes, open it up, and you'll just see lots of bags. And then I typically put just a piece of paper, not fancy, just like scrap paper, and I just write with a Sharpie whatever the activity is so that way when I pull it out, I can see it and I remember what it is. I don't have a really good system for like logging. I probably should have like a list of all the different activities. That's a great project for me to work on. But I don't currently have that. So typically when I'm like, I'm going to do centers, I try to go and look first at what I have. Be like, okay, we're working on quarter rest, pull out the box with all the quarter rest stuff, look through it and see what I want to use and what I might want to add.
Yeah, I organize my manipulatives in very similar ways using those scrapbook boxes. Fun fact, next week's episode, number 157, is going to be all about classroom storage for manipulatives. But I always found that the biggest thing was organizing it by concept. So again, these were my melodic ones, these were my rhythmic ones, these were my composer ones, that way, because again, if I'm looking for something, I know where to start. But I never got to the understanding of like, I never had like a spreadsheet or anything like that to understand what I had. I was always kind of, like you said, kind of going and checking before I created something new. So now I kind of want to talk about a little bit about the elephant in the room. We've kind of danced around it a little bit, but a lot of music teachers struggle with letting go of control. And let's be honest, when you do something like centers, we are letting go of some of that control. Can you talk about how teachers can really navigate that shift in mindset when going from, I'm a teacher, I'm instructing, this is what we're doing, to this is what we're doing in centers, and we have a little bit more independent. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, it is hard. It is really worth it, but it's really difficult to kind of shift, especially because as music teachers, we come from a background of band, choir, orchestra, where the conductor's at the front and he is in charge or she is in charge of the music that is happening. And so it's really hard to kind of reframe our minds and realize we're not doing the same thing. This is different. The first part of letting go of control, I think if you kind of take baby steps, that might help the most. So at the end of a lesson, do a small group activity, where everyone's doing the same thing, but they're in groups and you're not, actively in front and doing your whole little performance dance. And so once you do like little things like that, it'll help kind of build up your confidence. And you'll also see how much the kids light up. I will say my current school is a STEAM school, which is really like different and odd. We're the only STEAM certified school in Georgia, but for elementary school. But I have seen through that, STEAM is all about like putting the effort on the kids and making the kids do the work. We're all about, last year we did a musical and the kids had to make the whole set. They had to design everything. They had to make everything. And I mean, yes, it looks like it's made by a 10-year-old, but it really was created by a 10-year-old. And so I have seen through the years how much of a difference it makes, like this school versus my previous school, of just the kids really taking that ownership of their learning. And I promise you, if you just give me a little bit of trust, even if we don't know each other, it will work out really well. So just take those little baby steps to kind of help you out. The other thing I know a lot of you are thinking is like, oh my gosh, my kids barely, behave well when we're in regular whole group activities. Like, how on earth would we do centers? And I feel you. My previous school especially was not highly regarded in the county, but I loved those kids and it was a learning curve for sure. But I swear they act better in small groups because they're able to talk. They're able to, have that, like, it's not quite as stressful. It's a little bit more relaxed. They're able to talk. They're able to, play games and do fun things. And so I really found that typically we had better behavior in centers than we did whole group because it wasn't quite as rigid and as structured. I did have some classes that I did not have a group to myself. I monitored the whole time walking around, and your kids and those things. And so you can tell, who needs a little bit of extra encouragement to do the right thing. But overall, I did find that it worked a lot better. And it really, I know it's so hard to get over that first hurdle of like doing it. I mean, trusting the process that it's going to work, but it really will work if you can let go of a little bit of control.
So you're going to be doing a little bit of a deep dive into centers inside that music teacher community soon. Without giving too much away, can you share a few things that you're going to be diving into during the training?
Yes. So when we go through the training, we will talk through just like Centers 101. So we're going to talk through like how to choose your activities. We'll talk about how to get them prepped so that they're ready, how to make sure that your groups are prepped so that the first day goes pretty smoothly as best as possible. Really how to simplify things so that it's not difficult. We'll talk a lot about activities you can do with very little resources. So that way, again, you're not making a whole bunch of stuff, but we'll talk about things that are already in your classroom or just like simple things that you can use. I'll also be giving away some things that you can use in your class to make life really easy. And so we'll just go through. I'm hoping that you come out of it feeling really prepared and really excited for your first centers activities. And if you're already a centers person, that you'll maybe learn some like tips and tricks and get some activities out of it.
So again, though members of the community, you'll have access to the live training as well as a recording that's going to be living inside the library indefinitely. So we'll leave the link in the show notes for you to join that if you were not already. But Becca, I would love to know if there's one piece of advice that you would give to teachers who are thinking about trying centers for maybe the first time, but feels a little nervous. What would that one piece of advice be?
Ooh.
I know you can only get one.
I know. I'm like, oh, at the last summit, I gave like 52 tips or something crazy. So I'm not good at like narrowing it down to the one thing. I think the one thing I would say is just to go for it. It's one of those things that you have to try. And once you try, you will fall in love with it. It's not as hard as it sounds. It sounds like this big, huge thing, and it's really not. So just go for it, try it out. And you know what? If the first time it fails, it's fine. You can try it again. You probably have 5 other classes that you can try it with before that rotation ends. So just go for it. Don't be scared. You can do it. I believe in you.
Perfect. So Becca, where can our listeners find you online and learn a little bit more about you and the work that you do online?
So I am Becca's Music Room pretty much everywhere. I have a website with lots and lots and lots of blog posts. It's beccasmusicroom.com. You can find me over on Instagram, Becca's Music Room. Also on YouTube as Becca's Music Room. I have tons of videos, tons of blog posts, lots of things up there. So if you need something, like go to one of those, check out the search bar and, search for centers, search for whatever it is you're looking for. And I probably have something about it. And then I also have a Teachers Pay Teachers store where you can find tons and tons and tons of centers activities as well as lesson packs and different things like that. So Becca's Music Room everywhere.
All right, Becca, we'll be sure to link those in the show notes so people can get to hang out with you a little bit more. Thank you again for joining us on the podcast. We love getting to hang out with you, and we hope that some of our viewers can join you at your upcoming workshop. Becca, thank you so much for what you do, both in the classroom and then for the teachers online. And for the viewers, thank you so much for joining us for today. And in case no one has told you lately, thank you so much for making a difference in the lives of the students that you teach.